The Shocking Secret of a Teacher. Everyone Trusted. Chapter 1. The classroom was quiet until two uniformed officers walked in. Their faces were serious, their presence heavy. "Mrs. Howard?" one of them asked. The woman at the front of the room froze. She was 47 years old, dressed neatly in a blue cardigan, her brown hair tied back in a simple bun. Her students adored her. To them, she was the calm teacher who read stories and smiled every morning. "Yes?" she said, barely above a whisper. "You're under arrest for the murder of your husband, Robert Howard." The chalk she held slipped from her hand and shattered on the floor. The sound echoed through the room. Her students gasped. Some looked confused, others frightened. She blinked rapidly, her voice trembling. "What case is this about?" Neither officer answered. One began to read her rights, while the other gently took her hands and cuffed them behind her back. "Please," she whispered, "please don't plaster my face on Facebook." The children stared in silence. One little girl asked, "Mrs. Howard, are you coming back?" But Heather didn't answer. Tears filled her eyes as she was led away. The classroom door closed behind her, and the room fell into stillness. To everyone in Farmington, she had always been the kind teacher who never hurt anyone. No one could imagine her doing something like this. But that morning, everything changed. To understand how she ended up here, we have to go back to the morning of November 29. 2020. It was still dark outside when a trembling voice called 911. "My husband isn't breathing," the woman cried. "There's blood everywhere. Please hurry." Her name was Heather Howard. Police arrived minutes later at a small house on Cottonwood Avenue. The front porch light was on. Inside, Heather met them at the door, her robe soaked with tears. "He's in the bedroom," she said. The office. Ayers followed her down the hall. On the floor of the bedroom lay a man in his late 40s, pale and still. There were 3 small wounds on his chest. Heather stood a few feet away, shaking. "I think he cut himself," she said. "Maybe with a razor, or a knife. I don't know." Officer Reynolds knelt beside the body. The blood pattern looked wrong. The wounds were shallow, the carpet barely stained. It didn't look like suicide. "Where's the weapon?" he asked. Heather looked confused. "I don't know," she said softly. "I woke up and found him like this." She claimed she had fallen asleep on the couch around midnight and woke up at 5 in the morning. But something about her story didn't sit right with the officers. Later, when paramedics confirmed Robert was dead, Heather began to cry harder. "He was fine last night," she said. "We watched TV, had one drink, and went to bed. We were happy." Inside the same house were her son Tyler, his girlfriend Elizabeth, and their 2 kids. Elizabeth told police she had heard Heather crying much earlier, around 3:30 in the morning. That small detail didn't match Heather's version. It was the first sign that something was off. By sunrise, investigators had sealed off the scene. They searched for clues, took pictures, and wrote down everything. Heather said she had tried to clean her husband's wounds with a washcloth. When police found it, there was barely any blood on it. The knife was missing. As they questioned her, her answers kept changing. At first, she said she found him in bed. Then she said he was on the floor. She said it was a razor, then a steak knife. Detective Reynolds leaned forward. "Ma'am, please think carefully. Which one was it?" Heather looked down. I don't remember." Her voice was soft, but her eyes moved quickly. It looked less like confusion and more like fear. Meanwhile, her son Tyler gave. The detectives looked at each other. It was an odd thing to say for someone who claimed nothing happened. Still, they had no solid proof. Not yet. That night, Heather sat alone in the living room. The police tape still fluttered outside her house. The rooms were silent, except for the hum of the refrigerator. She stared at the spot where Robert used to sit. They had fought often, though she never admitted it. He drank heavily. So did she. Their love had turned into something bitter, something that burned both of them. But no one outside the house knew that. Not her co-workers, not her neighbors. At least, not yet. A few days later, a report came back from the medical examiner. The wounds on Robert's chest didn't match a self-inflicted injury. The angle, the depth, and the force were all wrong. Whoever stabbed him had been standing over him. Then came the discovery that changed everything. Police found the missing steak knife hidden inside a drawer of clean kitchen utensils. It had Robert's DNA on the handle, but almost no blood on the blade. It had been washed. The investigation shifted. This was no longer a possible suicide. It was something darker. That evening, Detective Reynolds sat in his car outside Heather's home. Through the misted window, he could see the faint light of her kitchen. "She's lying," he said quietly to himself. "We just don't know why yet." Inside, Heather stood by the counter, staring into the darkness beyond the window. Her reflection looked pale and tired. She whispered to herself, "It was an accident. He made me do it. He made me." Then she stopped. In the reflection, she saw something move outside. A shadow crossing the yard. Her chest tightened. She turned off the light, her breath quick and shallow. Was it the police again? Or someone else? The house was silent, the air heavy with fear. Heather stepped back from the wind. Ow! Her heart racing. The shadow stopped moving. She couldn't tell if it was real or just her mind playing tricks. Then a soft sound came from the back door. A slow, deliberate creak. Her hand flew to her mouth. Someone was out there. And before the night was over, something would happen that would change everything again. Heather stood frozen in the dark kitchen, her pulse pounding in her ears. The creak from the back door came again, slower this time. She held her breath. Outside, the wind whispered through the trees, making the old branches tap against the window. Her heart felt like it was about to burst. She took a cautious step forward, each foot pressing lightly on the cold tile floor. Another sound. A soft metallic rattle, like someone trying the handle. She reached for her phone on the counter, but it wasn't there. She'd left it on the living room couch. For a moment, she thought of running to get it, but fear kept her rooted in place. Then, silence. The back door didn't move again. Heather waited, her eyes fixed on the window. After what felt like forever, she finally turned the light back on. The reflection of her pale face looked back at her, ghost-like. Maybe it was just the wind, she told herself. Maybe it was nothing. But deep down, she knew something had shifted that night. Not outside her home, but inside her mind. The next morning, the air in Farmington was cold and sharp. Detective Reynolds sat in his office, reviewing the photos from the scene again. The inconsistencies were piling up. The wounds, the blood pattern, the missing weapon, and most of all, Heather's story that kept changing. His partner, Detective Lewis, entered with a file in hand. "Got something," he said. "A message from Robert's sister. She says he was never suicidal. Says he was quiet, maybe on the spectrum, but definitely not the kind of man to harm himself." Reynolds leaned back in his chair. "That fits what we saw." Lewis flipped open another report. "And look at this. Her son, Tyler. He told one of our officers that his mom hit him 2 weeks before Robert died. Said it wasn't the first time." Reynolds sighed. "So, she's got a temper. Seems like it." Reynolds tapped a pen on his desk. "We need more than behavior. We need proof." Lewis nodded. "I think we'll get it. Her story's got holes big enough to walk through." That afternoon, Heather went to stay at her sister's house on the edge of town. She said she couldn't sleep in the same home where her husband died. She told everyone she was heartbroken. She spoke softly, kept her head down, and cried when people asked questions. But her sister, Maria, noticed things. The way Heather avoided talking about Robert. How her eyes stayed dry when she said she missed him. How she snapped when Maria mentioned the police. "He was drinking again," Heather said one night. "You know how he gets when he drinks." Maria frowned. "Heather, what are you trying to say?" Heather turned away. "He pushed me too far." Maria's stomach dropped. "What do you mean by that?" But Heather didn't answer. She just walked to the window and stared outside, lost in her thoughts. A week later, police brought Heather back for another interview. This time, she didn't seem as nervous. She wore a pressed blouse, her hair neat, her voice calm. Detective Reynolds began carefully. "We just want to clarify a few things," he said. "You mentioned you went to bed after your husband, but later you said you slept on the couch. Which is it?" Heather smiled faintly. "I slept on the couch. He wet the bed. I didn't want to argue." Reynolds made a note. "All right. You also told us you tried to help him when you found him." "Yes. I used a washcloth." He nodded. "We found that washcloth. There was almost no blood on it." Heather hesitated. "Maybe I was in shock." "Maybe," he said quietly. "And the knife? The one you said you didn't know about?" She looked down. "I must have forgotten. I was upset." Reynolds leaned forward. "Mrs. Howard, you didn't forget. You cleaned it. We found it in your kitchen drawer, washed and put away." Her lips tightened. "That's not possible." "It's possible," he said. "And it happened." For the first time, her calm expression cracked. "I didn't do this," she whispered. "I'm not a bad person." Reynolds sat back. "Then help me understand why your story keeps changing." Heather's hands shook slightly. "Because none of this makes sense. I loved him." He studied her for a long moment. "Sometimes people love the ones they hurt most." Heather's eyes filled with tears. "You're twisting my words." "Am I?" Reynolds asked softly. She looked away, silent. That night, after the interview, Reynolds and Lewis sat together in the car outside the precinct. "She's lying," Lewis said. "You saw it in her face." "Yeah," Reynolds replied. "But we need her to prove it for us." "Maybe she already has," Lewis said, holding up his phone. "Robert's phone records came back. There's an audio file recorded 6 days before he died. You'll want to hear this." He pressed play. A woman's voice filled the car, shouting, furious. "You think you can treat me like a fool? You think I won't do something about it?" Then a man's voice, shaky. "Heather, please, just calm down." "Don't tell me to calm down," she screamed. The recording ended with a sharp thud, then silence. Reynolds stared ahead. "That's it. That's the real Heather." Meanwhile, at her sister's house, Heather sat alone on the back porch. The air was cold, her breath visible in the dark. She held a cup of tea that had gone cold long ago. She knew the police were closing in. The questions were getting sharper, the tone colder. She could feel the walls closing around her. Her mind went back to that night. The shouting, the broken glass. The moment everything went wrong. She pressed her hands to her face, whispering, "It wasn't supposed to happen like that." But the truth she tried to bury was clawing its way back to the surface. 2 nights later, her son Tyler came by to check on her. "Mom," he said quietly, "the detectives came by again. They're asking more questions." She looked at him with tired eyes. "Told them everything." Tyler hesitated. "Did you?" Heather's jaw tightened. "You think I did it, don't you?" "I don't know what to think," he said. "But I know you've been lying." Her face hardened. "Watch your mouth." He stood. "I can't keep pretending, Mom. I heard you that night. You were fighting." "I woke up when something fell." She stared at him, her hands gripping the armrest of her chair. "You're wrong," she said. "You didn't hear anything." He shook his head and walked toward the door. "I just hope you tell the truth before they find it themselves." When the door closed, Heather sat in silence, her breathing shallow. Then, outside, headlights swept across the window. A car stopped in front of the house. Two figures stepped out. She didn't move. She just watched through the glass as the officers approached the door, their faces dimly lit by the porch light. A knock echoed through the quiet house. Heather's hands trembled. She knew what was coming. She stood slowly, every part of her body heavy with dread. When she opened the door, Detective Reynolds was standing there, his badge glinting under the light. "Mrs. Hoare," he said quietly, "we need to talk." Heather's face went pale. "Is it about the recording?" Reynolds didn't answer. He simply said, "You might want to sit down."